It's election time, it's election time. Oh, what joy, it's election time. Now, for those who are not in the know, basically it's like, September 2021, and there's an election going on. Not exactly something I'm too thrilled about myself, but, well, let's just go to the VoteCompass and we'll basically see how my, political leanings have basically drifted so far. So, this is basically, the CBC news page, and on it they basically have a VoteCompass for, each specific election, I guess. As you can basically see, there's 6 major parties that I basically vote for. Though, to be honest, basically the Bloc Québécois aren't basically in my my region of Canada. And there is actually other parties as well that are in play because I do have for example, Communist Canada that's basically in my riding, but minor party is basically minor, so whatever. Anyhow, let's just get started. We'll basically see how I basically stack up. So where's my postal code? Alright, this is optional. I'm just going to skip it. I don't want to show people where I basically live, so whatever. Please select your riding. I'll note that my riding is basically in Halifax, so... Control assume, apparently. Alright. So that's basically my riding right here. Let's start the survey. Alright, so... I'll note that basically the idea of these questions that we asked is that they're all a breakdown of issues that basically affect Canada. So basically have you can see here policy, parties, profiles, stuff like that. So Proposition 1 of 30. No new oil pipelines should be built in Canada. So at this point, I'll note that basically we're probably at that point in where we probably really should be building new pipelines and stuff like that, but where we should be stopping, we're not really sure as well. So I'm sort of neutral on this proposition because basically I'm not here or for basically for at this point. So neutral. How much of a role should private sector have in healthcare? So basically this is should they have much less? Should they have much more? Should they have about the same? For my thoughts basically on the private sector, basically right now they have quite a bit of sway basically currently in healthcare in Canada. I mean we do have private private healthcare basically in terms of dentistry for example and eye treatment and stuff like that. How much should they have? They probably should have about the same as now, to be honest, because some things are not that major. We don't need to worry about people having free dental care for example. So about the same as now is probably fine. Canada's laws against hate speech place too many limits on freedom of expression. Alright, so in terms of hate speech and stuff like that, Canada's laws are probably not the worst, but they're not America's laws, which basically just let you do whatever you want to. So do I agree? Do I disagree? Personally, I somewhat agree with this because there really shouldn't be limits on any sort of expression unless it's really needed. So I'll somewhat agree to that. Some provinces pay more than their fair share to support the rest of the country. Yeah, I'll somewhat agree to that. I'll note that basically an equalization treatment for provinces in Canada, where the poor provinces are basically helped out by the richer ones, and some provinces basically they get way more than they basically should, for example. So yeah, somewhat agree with this. How much should Canada do to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions? All right, so I'll note this point. We're obviously having much more climate issues basically happening over the world at this point, so we're gonna say much more to this, I think. The federal government should give priority to visible minorities when hiring. No. The federal government should be hiring the best candidates for the job. All Canadians should have access to government-funded prescription drugs. Alright, so note that basically in Canada right now, prescription drugs are basically getting more and more expensive, so this is something that not necessarily against, but I don't necessarily agree with government basically buying stuff basically just for its public where they really don't need to. I somewhat agree with this, but at the same time I don't really think it's necessary, so neutral. How much should be done to accommodate religious minorities in Canada? So, should more be done? Should less be done? In terms of religion, I'm not really a big fan of accommodating them too much. They're already accommodating quite a bit, so somewhat less is probably good at this point. How much should the wealthier people pay in taxes? So I'll note basically in the recent election, one of the promises that the NDP, the New Democratic Party based in Canada, basically made was that they would tax the rich a lot more, specifically the super rich. Now, in terms of taxing people, the super rich can always basically move out, but they probably should still be taxed more than what they are right now. So I do somewhat agree with it. So yeah. People should be required to show proof of COVID-19 vaccination in order to attend public events. Alright, should they have to show proof? Now, I'll note that basically, for COVID-19 vaccinations and vaccine passports, as they're basically, being commonly referred to, I do believe that, passports are a good idea, but I don't think, it should be something that, the public, events would be, necessarily, you have to basically have it for. What I see vaccine passports is really useful for is basically for those places for example universities that don't basically want to have unvaccinated people basically attending their their facilities, for example, without proof that they're actually doing stuff. So in many ways, I think that I somewhat agree with this, but I'm sort of neutral to it because I don't necessarily want restrictions basically placed on people. So I'm sort of neutral to it. Canada should decriminalize possession of illicit drugs for personal use. Yeah, I somewhat agree. Honestly, if you have illicit drugs at this point, it's really not the people who we should be going after. It should be the people that distribute them to begin with. How much tax should large corporations pay? Alright, so here's the thing. I'll note that large corporations, they can they can go and stay in all that stuff. So probably about the same as now. It's probably what where we probably want to basically have it right now. So yeah. The thing about the large corporations is that they can very easily move out of Canada, so to speak, the country. So unlike rich people who may be more inclined to stay, corporations will basically just leave if they can. So yeah, gotta watch out for that. How much control should the federal government have over what Canadians say online? Alright, so this is actually something that they should have some control, but not that much. And it's actually getting to a point where, I kind of would like if they had, somewhat less, so... I basically don't want the government basically interfering with, what you're going to basically say, doing stuff like that, so yeah. Only those who speak both English and French should be considered for top jobs in the federal government. Strongly disagree. I believe that English and French are important, but, not necessarily, in every position, so... whatever. How much money should the federal government give to Canadians whose employment was disrupted by COVID-19 pandemic? So this is a big issue in Canada right now, where some restaurants and stuff like that are having problems basically recruiting people back from the pandemic because basically they have gotten money from the government to not work for the most part, and essentially there's a worker shortage basically for low income jobs. Now, I think during the pandemic that is basically fine. But at this point, it really should be somewhat less. We should be trying to encourage people to get back to work. So, yeah, somewhat less. Quebec should become an independent state. All right, so do I agree with this? Do I not agree with this? Actually, at this point, whether Quebec wants to be an independent state or not, I really don't care. We got to that point where it's just become an issue where if Quebec wants to be independent, they can be independent. But it would harm Canada. Obviously, we'd be split in two, but whatever. Just let them do whatever they want to. Basically, I'm neutral to it. Canada's human rights law should require to transgender people to be referred to by their stated gender pronouns. So I'll note that basically, how you basically refer to someone, I really don't care about it. But again, it's something the government should really be interfering with. So I somewhat disagree with it. So yeah, somewhat disagree. How much should the Canadian government do to make amends for the past treatment of Indigenous peoples? Alright, so, for those who don't know, in Canada recently there was an issue where we basically had a bunch of burial grounds basically found that basically had lots of dead Indigenous children from our past in Canada. we definitely should be doing a lot more to like try and like make amends to the indigenous people, because we did we did some nasty basically to them. So we definitely should be doing somewhat more than what we're currently right now. So yeah. The federal government should guarantee a minimum income for all Canadian adults, regardless of whether or not they have a job. Alright, guaranteed income. So I'm actually not against this idea. The thing about guaranteed income is that if a country is basically rich enough, and we probably are rich enough at this point, I could see this being a thing that we could actually do at this point. So I'm not necessarily against basically this, basically here's the thing. Proponents against this would basically say it's going to basically make it so people won't work minor jobs attendance basically at restaurants and stuff like that. But the same thing may be said where there should be paid for more anyways. And with automation basically coming in, this will become more and more of an issue where basically things get automated. For example, we won't need say cashiers at the grocery store, for example, because it's basically just automated. So yeah, I'm not necessarily against this. So I somewhat agree with this actually. Alright, how much should the Canadian government spend on police services? Probably about the same as now, or somewhat more. Honestly, our police force basically needs to be pay more to do training and stuff like that, more so than anything else. Not really so much for their equipment, but just for better training and such. So yeah, somewhat more. How high should the federal minimum wage be? Probably about the same as now. Basically, this is one of those things. Basically, if you're working, basically, you should be able to get a minimum wage. And if you make it too high, obviously, people won't be getting hired because there's many automation happening at the same time. But as I basically said, we're at that point where everyone should have a guaranteed minimum wage possibly. So about the same as now is probably where we want to obviously have it. The federal budget deficit should be reduced even if it leads to fewer public services. So I'll note that basically here's the thing, right? Public services are important, and I'll note that the deficit in Canada is actually becoming an issue. So I guess I'm neutral to this because I don't want to see public services go, but at the same time I don't want to see the deficit basically getting higher than it is right now. So it's an issue. All semi-automatic firearms should be banned in Canada. So I'll note that basically with Canada right now, there's an issue with firearms where people basically make the news every so often about mass shootings and stuff like that. But those people who make those news stories, they're usually using illegal firearms. So really, I don't see this basically helping at all. So I somewhat disagree with this. Quebec should be formally recognized as a nation in the Constitution. So here's another thing, by the way. We do actually need to update our Constitution, but to do that, we need to have Quebec's approval as well as a bunch of other provinces. So this is not the easiest thing basically to do. This this change here. It would be nice to recognize Quebec, but at the same time, trying to update the Constitution would be a pain. So I somewhat disagree with this. How many immigrants should Canada admit? Probably more at this point because more issues are basically happening over the world, and we already need refugee climate change refugees, so to speak. So yeah, somewhat more of this. How accessible should abortion services be across Canada? Somewhat more. So this is a big issue in Canada, by the way, where abortion services aren't exactly that accessible in Canada. Basically, in some the poorer places, it's very hard to get abortion services because there's no doctor around to basically do them. And well, yeah, somewhat more should be the issue here. Canada should end its ties to the British monarchy. I don't care. Neutral. Canada should rename public spaces which are currently named after historical figures accused of racism. Alright, so I strongly disagree with this. This for the simple reason that, this is our history, by the way. And as much as it is a thing about racism and stuff like that, or other issues, it's basically a different time, and I really think it should be noted that it was a different time these people basically lived in. So whatever. Strongly disagree. How much say should Indigenous people have over Canada's natural resources are used? Now, I'll note that the thing about Indigenous people is that they, they lived here first, by the way, so we do actually try and respect that here in Canada. And, they should, have, some say in it. I think they probably have, a good amount of say right now, so about the same as now is probably, where we're basically at. And how much should the federal government make individual Canadians pay for every ton of greenhouse gas they emit through fossil fuel consumption? Alright, so there should be some encouragement from the general populace not to basically use greenhouse gas, meaning substances for the fuel and stuff like that. So somewhat more should be the thing here, I guess. Alright, so we're gonna jump into parties next, but I just want to check my recording here and make sure it's basically keep going on. So one moment. I'm not exactly running any music through my headphones here, by the way, so if they shut off, then they'll shut off. So just turn them on, turn back on during this video, make sure they stay on. Alright, so now recently I'll note that basically the Liberal Party is the one who's currently in power in Canada, or were in power, and their leader, Justin Trudeau, basically is the one who basically called this election for 2021. So, regardless of the party you intend to vote for in this election, in general, how likely are you to support the Liberal Party of Canada? And the answer here is a big fat 1. So I'll note that the Liberal Party, I'm not really so much against the Liberal Party itself for its policies and such. I'm actually probably closely aligned mostly to the Liberal Party and a lot of my questions and stuff like that. But the thing is about the Liberal Party right now, there's been a lot of big issues with Justin Trudeau, where in the past he basically made decisions that were kind of irresponsible. And right from the get-go with his election call here in the summer, that was something that I was really against for myself, because we're basically still trying to get over the COVID-19 pandemic here, and at the same time we also have the refugee crisis in Afghanistan. So he picked a really bad time to call the election, and there's really no need for him to basically call it here, because he still has another 2 years before he basically had to call one, and he's basically getting stuff passed through the legislature. So pretty much I'm against the liberals just for that matter. Alright, so the NDP, regardless of the party you intend to vote for, how to basically like these guys. So I'll note that basically in terms of alternatives, basically to boot out the liberals, voting New Democratic Party would probably be one of the best places for getting them out of office in my region of Canada. So I'm actually somewhat supportive of these guys, even if I'm not exactly closely aligned to them. So at least a 6 for these guys. Regardless of the party you intend to vote for, blah blah, Conservative Party of Canada. Now, I'll note by the way, in terms of the parties in Canada, the Conservatives are basically the right-leaning party, and I'm not necessarily basically for these guys, but again, basically if there's a chance basically putting out the Liberals, then I'm not exactly against voting for these guys to do it. I'm probably not as inclined to vote for these guys as I am for the NDP, but they're up there at least at the 5, so yeah. Blah blah, the Green Party of Canada. Alright, so note that the Green Party of Canada are sort of a non-issue in this party, this campaign, because they don't really have enough support for anything. I like these guys more than I could do the Liberals, but at the same time, they're just too little basically to be voted for, so there's a measly little 2, I think. The People's Party of Canada. Alright, so the People's Party of Canada is basically the fully right-wing party in this country. They're even more right than the Conservatives, and their policies I really don't care much for, so they're actually a big 0. Alright, in your opinion, how likely is it that people in your riding will elect the People's Party of Canada? I'm going to say a big fat 0 for that as well. I don't see those guys basically having much chance in the Atlantic provinces anywhere right now, and they're too small, so whatever to them, but they're not getting it, I don't think. Alright, so how likely is it people are elected New Democratic Party? Now, if I basically look at parties that could be elected in Canada, the NDP probably do have a good chance of being elected in my riding, so I'm going to say these guys are probably an 8, at least. Green Party of Canada. So, again, these guys are very, like, low on, like, the tone pool for being elected. So, again, not all likely. It's probably, like, big fat 0 for them. Conservative Party of Canada. Alright, so note that the Conservative Party of Canada, they do have a fairly high chance of being, like, elected Canada, I think. They actually have, like, good momentum. They're, like, party right now, so they actually don't stand a chance. I don't think they stand a chance against the NDP at this point, but, they're enough basically that I can at least give them, like, a number value, so maybe, like, a 3 or 4. And the Liberal Party of Canada, they have a chance of being elected again, but, I think they'll probably be suffering a little bit in this election just because of, like, the election call, so I'm just going to give them, like, a little 3, I think. Alright, so, these people who are basically being shown up here, these are actually the leaders of different parties. And Daniel Paul is basically the leader of the Green Party, and in terms of basically competency, I think she's doing okay for, like, what she's basically doing right now, but she's probably not the most competent leader basically Green basically ever had, so probably it's a 3 for her. Aaron O'Toole, this is basically the leader of the Conservative Party, and competent, yes, this guy's very competent for, like, what he's basically doing right now. I actually found, like, this guy's, like, probably, like, the best leader basically, like, being, like, portrayed of, like, all the parties, so he's at least a 9. Jagmeet Singh. Again, we have a fairly competent leader. I don't think Jagmeet Singh is, like, the best leader, like, being, like, portrayed right now. Like, I give that to, like, Aaron O'Toole, but he's fairly, like, basically up there with, like, Aaron O'Toole being, like, one of the more competent leaders to vote for. I don't know if he's best or worse, but I'll give him at least a 7. Alright, so the current Prime Minister, or, the Prime Minister basically of, like, Canada before, like, he basically called the election, Justin Trudeau. I can't say I find, like, Justin Trudeau all that competent. Basically, like, he's done some good in this in our country, but at the same time, there's been a lot of issues with him, so he's at least a 2, I think. He's even worse than Daniel Paul basically for, like, a lot of stuff. So yeah, a lot of bad decisions on his part, I think. Maxime Bernier. So this is basically the leader of the People's Party of Canada. Again, I don't see this guy as being too competent. He's more competent than, like, those other two, but, like, and Daniel Paul and like, Justin Trudeau, but he's not the most competent person, I don't think. So I'll trust you as Justin Trudeau. Do I trust the leader? Alright, so at some point I do have to say, like, there is some good values for, like, Justin Trudeau, and trustworthy is, like, one of his traits. I don't think it's a good trait for him, but, it is a trait that he basically has, so he is somewhat trustworthy. And Emma Paul? Now, I trust that Emma Paul is probably doing the best she can, but, he's not, like, necessarily the most trustworthy person, I don't think, so, a 6 for her, I think. How trustworthy do I find the Conservative leader here? So, I'll note that basically in terms of, like, trustworthiness, I don't really trust the Conservative leader. I assume that he's basically, like, saying a lot of his stuff basically to get himself elected, and he's basically putting some, like, he's doing the best that he can with his, like, his policies and stuff like that. But it's basically sort of like, where he might go with, like, his, like, policies. I have no idea when he's elected, so trust him somewhat, but not too much. Maxime Bernier. Honestly, I actually do trust Maxime Bernier. He's basically running his campaign to be, like, how can I put this? He's basically running it, like, fairly honestly, I think. I honestly wouldn't vote for him, but, I do trust him, so I do find him trustworthy. Jagmeet Singh, another politician, I think is basically saying what he needs to get elected. Though I don't think it's basically, like, as bad as, like, Aaron O'Toole. So probably a 7 for his trustworthiness. Alright, so the following questions are optional and not affect your results. They're used to position you within the general population, so alright, so let's see here. If a federal election were held today, which party would you vote for? So if I was basically to vote for someone today, it'd probably be the New Democratic Party, just because I want to basically get, like, the Liberals out of office, and I think they're probably the best position to basically do so. It could be I might, like, switch that over to Conservative. I think they have a better chance to, but, it's very much strategic voting basically for me right now to, like, determine, like, who basically like will be best positioned to basically kick out the Liberal Party. So yeah, basically that's what it is. I did vote for the Liberal Party basically in 2019, by the way. And I won't say it's like necessarily like a bad party, the Liberal Party. Like I do line up very well with like a lot of their policies and such, but they need to go, I think, for like this election. I'm male, and yeah, lots of stupid questions, but whatever. In which year was I born? I'll note that basically I was born in 1986, so I'm a millennial. One of the older millennials, though. And let's get to this other stuff here. So, I only have a bachelor's degree, nothing really special. At any time since September 2020, have you attended blah blah school? No. What is my current employment status? I'll note that currently I'm basically employed like part time. Don't want to be employed more than that during the pandemic, so quite happy with that. Select a religion, no religion. What is the language that you first learned at home in childhood and still understand? That's English. Where were you born? Canada. No. What are your ethnic or cultural origins of your ancestry? Those are Scottish, so I guess we have to enter it in here manually, so there we go, Scottish. I actually have more than that. I probably have English as well, so throw in some English as well, but fairly typical. It's just basically from the British Isles is where I'm basically from, so nothing really too special. Which of the following categories best describe you? White. Yep, there it is, white right there. Which of the following best describes your sexual orientation? Straight. Counting yourself, how many people live in your household? There's actually a total of 5 people live in my household. And one of those people is under the age of 15. So, yep, my little niece. Which of the following best describes your combined household income before taxes? Well, I don't have to answer this question, but it's somewhere in there. Yeah, I have no idea what my income basically is. I'll note basically at the post office I earn quite a bit, but there's also other people, and I'm not exactly sure what all their incomes basically are, so I'm not going to go ask and whatever. In politics, people sometimes talk of left and right. Where would you place yourself on a scale of 0 to 10 for left and right? So I'll note that I'm probably basically more left than I am right in terms of policy. I'm not sure how much from the center I basically would be, but I'm more toward the left than I am toward the right, so probably more around there as a 4 is fairly good. Generally speaking, how interested are you in politics? I'm somewhat interested, honestly, because I am doing this video here. It's not I'm talking about majorly, but I'm at least somewhat interested. What issue is most important to you in this election? The reason it was called. And I'm sure for a lot of people that's their reason as well, but whatever. And would you be willing to allow blah blah? Sure. I think I already submit this by the way, but basically can get stuff from VoteCompass if you want to, but whatever. Let's go to next here. Now let's calculate my result. Alright, so Canada 2021 federal election. The graphs below show your alignment with the parties. Each uses a different measure, and the results may differ from graph to graph. See FAQ for details. So this basically shows how I basically line up with all the different parties. And amazingly, apparently I line up most of the Conservative Party this year, apparently, so interesting. That's followed by the Green, then the Liberals, then the People's Party, and the New Democrat Party. So, odd, but okay. I've actually looked at the policy file, and I think I'm probably most closely aligned to Conservative parties, but I'm still going to probably vote for the the NDP basically because they're more likely to basically get elected in this area of mine. Now you can basically rate your results by so you can basically show basically how much these basically how much these relate to and stuff like that. So civil liberties, how much control does the federal government have over what Canadians say online, blah blah stuff like this. So I vote that pretty high. Employment, so how high should minimum wage be? Guaranteeing income and stuff like that. A fairly high, rate that fairly high as well. The environment. I care about the environment, but it's not that major an issue for me in this election, so probably a 4 for that. Equality, diversity, inclusion, just be visible minorities, stuff like that. This matters to me quite a bit actually because I don't want to basically have like stupidity running my government stuff like that. Fiscal policy. Honestly, I don't really care about fiscal policy at all, so that goes down there. Healthcare. Because of like COVID-19, our stuff is actually a lot more important to me this year around, so pretty high in that front. Immigration, multiculturalism. So how many immigrants should we have? How much should be done to accommodate religious minorities? So sort of in the middle for that one. Indigenous people. Usually I don't really care about the Indigenous people of Canada, but because of like stuff that happened recently, this is actually pretty high I think this time around. So at least it's at least a 5 for me. Law and order. Not the most important things I think we should be worrying about, so just give it a 1. Monarchy, again, doesn't matter to me at all. Official bilingualism, again, don't care. Quebec, again, don't care. Taxation. This somewhat matters to me because I want a successful country, so let's give it a 6. And we'll see basically how it's just basically how everything looks here. And it didn't really change much apparently there, but what are the results? Alright, so I'll note that basically just political compass basically what's really nice about it is actually has a 3D graph here. So right now basically I have a left to right and social progressive to conservative type of a thing over here. And you basically see where policy basically are basically very close to the middle here for our spread in Canada. I also make this into a 3D graph here though, and you can basically see how it looks on the air front here. So basically there's Quebec autonomy basically is a thing here. And you can see it basically shows where each of the parties basically are in terms of Quebec autonomy. So basically you see for People's Party they oppose Quebec autonomy. The NP are basically a little bit more supportive of it. I'm basically sort of in the middle here. I don't really care. And I'll just move it back over here a little bit. I think it's very interesting to have a 3D graph because you do obviously have these positioned different ways and stuff like that. I'm not really sure why I think that changes basically that third panel, but whatever. Alright, so basically in terms of 2D plane here, I'll note that basically as you can see here I'm basically closest to the liberal and the conservative basically parties for a lot of this stuff here. So basically in the political landscape, I'm probably closer to one of these guys for voting policy and stuff like that. Now I'll note basically for the liberals by the way, they're actually a lot more left than they are in this graph here because Justin Trudeau basically, even though he does have a lot of centralist policies, he's very much a leftist himself. So it's very much shown in his rhetoric that he is a lot more left than his party is. But that is what it is. All right, so basically there's a breakdown of other stuff. Here's how I rate my leaders. So I rate these guys lower, I rate these guys higher. So I'll note down here basically compare party and issues. So basically you can see where each the parties basically relate on the different questions basically I asked here. So for example, for the federal government should give prior to visible minors and hiring. So basically Green Party basically agrees with this somewhat. The Bloc Québécois and me basically somewhat agree with it. And people who strongly agree are the CPC as well as PPC, and people who strongly agree are the NDP and the Liberals. You see on here, Quebec's human rights should require transgender people to be recognized. So the People's Party of Canada basically disagree. So do the Conservatives. I somewhat disagree. Only other guys basically agree basically. And I'll note by the way, as you can basically see here, there's a big spread of where the parties basically lie on all these questions here. So basically, for example, for this one right here, you can see there's 5 different responses, and all the responses are all over the place. So yeah. And I'll probably basically go for the different questions as well. So if I want to go say to Quebec here, there's the stuff on Quebec. So basically they become an independent state. Basically NDP somewhat disagree. The Green are basically neutral. The Bloc Québécois basically agree. Everyone else basically strongly disagrees. Quebec should be formally recognized as a nation in the Constitution. So the People's Party of Canada basically disagree. So does the Green Party. So do I. But everyone else basically agrees. So either strongly disagree or fully agree, I guess. Alright, well, I could go through all the different things for the parties, but that's basically where I basically lie of my candidates basically right now. I'll probably do an air poll perhaps in the future, but this is basically good enough for now, I think. Hope you guys basically enjoy where I basically lie in my fair landscape for my parties. Hope you guys enjoyed and take care.